I was going to go and just paint my face as a wee cat and just do the podcast.
A sexy cat.
Minute Tim's episode 280, and I am your host Jamie, joined by my podcast pals Stephen.
What's happening?
And Melly.
Yes.
I'll tell you what's new, Stephen. The recording location, we are in a slightly different recording location at the moment because of COP26 has made it almost impossible to get into our studio.
Yeah.
So we've taken an alternative arrangement, so you might hear a little bit of sound difference, and there is no YouTube this week for that reason. Second thing that's new, boys, my cold, still here. Patrons will be right on cue with that cough, well aware of the cold that I've had for the past week or so. It's not COVID, we can all relax, but I am going to be coughing and spluttering and sounding terrible throughout the podcast. For that, I do apologise. And the third thing that's new, much more entertaining than that, is that we have a new sponsor for the podcast. Support for 20 Minute Tims is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped, Stephen, just launched their 4th generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. You heard that right, the 4.0. Join over 4 million men worldwide who have trusted Manscaped with this exclusive offer just for you, 20% off, free worldwide shipping. Insert the code TIMS, T-I-M-S, at manscaped.com. Look, it's 2021, and it means you can't have a big old thatch down there, Stephen.
Oh, no, come on.
You need to tidy up. And I mean, what were you using before? Because Manscaped, they gifted us some, I mean, they're ball trimmers. We're just going to call it what it is.
Yep.
They gifted us.
It's just a ball sack trimmer. It's just a ball sack trimmer from your podcast mates, you might say.
What were you using before you were gifted? You don't have to go into too graphic a detail.
Me, I'm among friends here, so knife and fork. Knife and fork, yep. Pool of blood every single time.
Disposable razor for this bear.
I was taking the old Mac 3 right across mine. Melly, you're wincing, and that's what I was doing when I was doing that every time. It was like surgery. It was like precision surgery. So Manscaped is basically a specially engineered trimmer to one of the girls in the Discord called it gain that optical inch.
Yes, yep, they're on to us. But yes, it is an additional benefit.
I heard, Stephen, from a friend of a friend that the man I'm pointing to in the corner here, Melly, it was like a baby bird sticking its head out a nest waiting to get fed until Manscaped arrived. That's what Melly was dealing with. But look, if you want to sort yourself out down there, get 20% off and free shipping with the code TIMS, T-I-M-S, at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Just use the code T-I-M-S, unlock your confidence, and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. Now, Stephen, that is the scripted advert out of the way. We have done our duty. Let's talk about Celtic's duty. It is Celtic's duty to win games. It's Celtic's duty to beat teams, boys, specifically at home.
Ideally, yeah.
But we have a bogey team. I remember a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, Stephen, we were talking about how bogey teams maybe don't exist. Livingston are definitely a bogey team for Celtic. That was a brutal, miserable game of football that I watched on Saturday.
Well, that's 4 points they've taken off us so far this season. Played them twice and still not beaten them. That was I can barely remember, if at all, a more frustrating afternoon at Celtic Park in my entire life.
Jesus.
Now, nothing each draws. They don't have to be the end of the world, right? I mean, we have nothing each draws every season, even Brendan Rodgers, not so much the first season because we barely dropped any points in that, but the second season, there were nothing each draws at home to St Johnstone and Dundee. In the third season, we had several nothing each draws. There was even 2 in a row at one point. So it happens, but it's the manner of it that just sends you up the road absolutely fuming. Fuming. We'll get into all the details, of course, but it was such a frustrating afternoon.
I mean, Melly, you and I travelled to the game. We did the At The Match podcast. Before the game, I was like, look, I'm thinking about 3-0 minimum, at least 3-0, because Celtic were more in that game against Hibs midweek. Absolutely brilliant. We were flying. We looked unstoppable. Everyone was talking about going top of the league. But that afternoon, I mean, Stephen called it frustrating. That's putting it politely. I thought it was absolutely abysmal.
It was one of those games when I was sitting beside Stephen, I'm like, time's going by quite quickly for there's not a lot happening. Like, Celtic just pressed them in and had them hemmed in, but just to see Livingston sitting there, I've never seen anything like it. I don't think I've been in a game where the striker spent most of his time 30 yards from his own goal. But just sat there himself, and then with the two banks behind him, I was like, this is going to be difficult to break down, but I thought Celtic would do it. We didn't get that pass right, we didn't get that final ball right, and it was very frustrating. The performance wasn't terrible. It was just that last bit in the final third where we just couldn't get it going. If Celtic had scored, I think we deserved to win the game. But you get rid of one hoodoo when you go to Easter Road and win in the league, and then you get Livingston the next one, the chance to go top. And really, if it had finished 0-0, we'd have been raging, but missing that penalty when we could have got out of jail just made it so frustrating.
Stephen, you're talking about these other 0-0s though, in my head, thinking back to them, that's one of these ones where you think, God, that team escaped with a life there. We're peppering the goal, but we created, I think, 2 shots on target before the penalty. I think we had 1 shot on target against the Livingston keeper. Like, Livingston were just, wasn't it anti-football? Wasn't it parking the bus? It was ever worse than that. Do you know what I mean? They dug a hole and buried the football, and the football didn't exist anymore. It was not alive in that game for Livingston. They had no intent. Now, you can, I saw something.
It is Halloween.
It is Halloween.
It was on point, on brand.
I can see a Din Club TV station asking the manager, the Celtic manager, do you have to give any, or have you get any credit to give to Livingston for that performance? I thought, what are you asking that for? They never battled and scraped a draw or put in this wonderful performance. Like, they weren't a good footballing team like perhaps Dundee United were a couple of weeks ago. They came and they sat in and they done absolute hee-haw. It was really, really pathetic. So it's weird to ask the manager that. They don't deserve any credit, but there's no obligation for Livingston to play football. We need to find a way to win games like that, don't we?
Yeah, and I usually come at this from a point of view of, there's no obligation. As you say, there's no obligation for these teams to play football. It's nothing new. We come to expect it, and they have an objective which they achieved. They got their draw. They were not interested in winning the game, but they got their draw. But that doesn't mean we need to give them credit for it. If anyone listening to this, if there's any Huns tuning in, there usually is, are thinking, sour grapes because you didn't get the win. Aye, I hold my hands up to it. You've absolutely nailed me there. I'm too right. I've got sour grapes. Like, there's organised and there's, come on, piss off. You know what I mean? As Melly said, their striker was 25 yards from goal for most of the game, and they were moving about in banks of 5 at the time and basically just camped in their own box. Again, right, the credit that they are due begins and ends with they got their point, but I'm not going to sit here and praise them for the way they went about it, because that's absolutely not. It's no good to anyone. It must be, Melly and I were talking about this at the game, it must be utterly demoralising to become a footballer and for that to be what you train for. Melly made the point at the game, you could train for that without a ball. You basically just do the old kind of 50s and 60s thing where you tie a rope around everybody and just move about in lines. So you're basically just running up and down like in a 20-yard space. So no, I thought it was a diabolical game of football, really. And we can talk about all the details. We apportion blame. What I'm left with, ultimately, my broad take on the game is that there's only so much you can do. If a team is determined to play like that, it's very, very difficult to open them up if they're not going to move. And we can talk about the creativity and not taking shots on all it. But at the same time, I was watching the game and I've seen a bit of it back as well. There are hardly any opportunities to just take shots on because we were getting. You see, if you get to the 18-yard box and nothing's open and they're just camped in their own box and you can't find any space, and Furuhashi, who is a master at finding space, just simply can't find any. We can't find space to get crosses in. We're not getting to the byline and crossing it. If you're presented with just a wall of players, how do you take the shot on? Because the crowd is going to get frustrated if you're not shooting, but likewise, they're going to get frustrated if you're booting the ball off shins that are closing you down. And then you get into the realms of the Ryan Christie stuff for last season where you're just launching shots for 40 yards. I
know, but this low block that everybody's talking about is, well, Melly, that when we tweeted about we were going to be talking about the low block tonight that Celtic came up against Livingston, we had a couple of people tweet us and say, look, can you explain what a low block is? So for the people who might not know,
It's just basically sitting in, as it says, low, so you're sitting very, very deep, and Livingston had the bank of 5, the bank of 4, then the one striker, so it's just cutting off all the space. The tighter these lines are to each other, these players, then the less space there is for Celtic to get in behind, and that's what we've seen. I watched the second half back as well, because me and you spoke about it after the game, like, maybe Celtic should have taken a shot on McGregor and Turnbull, I think we highlighted, should have taken shots on, but watching it, as Stephen said, there was maybe less than a split second of a shot, and if it's going past the guy in front of you, the guy behind him's there to block it as well. It was very difficult. Look, if it's not an art, but what Livingston done, it was brutal, but they done it so well. And when that happens, when you get a chance, you simply have to take it. And Celtic were gifted a chance and they didn't take it. So kind of nobody to blame but themselves, but very frustrating considering we could have had the chance. We got the lead down to 2 points during the week. We thought home game, put a bit of pressure on Rangers going into the weekend. First time we'll be top this season. And
since the start of last season, it's been a long time since we've been top in the league. Just even having that psychological advantage, even if it doesn't mean anything, even if it's just for, as you say, the less than 24 hours to the next game, it would have been something to...
Yeah, and it's pressure they haven't had for a long time. It was just the wee things, but we are in the exact same position we were in last week, so it's not the end of the world. If we sat here and we had a drawn against Hibs and beat Livingston, you're maybe thinking it's not that bad, but it's just the way it worked out for us. It was a frustrating one. Low block, teams do it, but I have not seen it like that before. That was incredible.
But part of the way you beat this low block is you move the ball quickly from side to side. That gets your opponent out of position, and then you release players. You know, we were doing it a lot in the first half. Jota was sitting right in front of me. We all sit in a similar area, and Jota was sitting right in front of us. And they were using their wingers as fullbacks and doubling up. But Celtic would move the ball out to the right. They would all shuffle out right. Jota would be one-on-one with their fullback. We'd get the ball out, and Jota was turning that boy inside out.
Yeah,
and he was putting in plenty of crosses for Giakoumakis, and Giakoumakis wasn't getting anywhere near them. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't getting in front of the defender. He wasn't really putting... I felt like... just like we're talking about the first half and these Jota crosses, because we'll talk about Abada as well separately. But Jota, I thought, was getting a lot of luck against that fullback, putting in a lot of balls. But that big centre half that they had barely moved 5 yards either side. They would just bump, heading it away. But even the ones that were in the vicinity for Giakoumakis, you're wanting to put himself about a bit and challenge for these.
Yeah, I was disappointed in him. Before the game we spoke about, like, Kyogo's dropped to the bench. There might not be space for him to get in behind, and there wasn't. But kind of looking at it in hindsight, I think maybe his movement would have been better than Giakoumakis.
Couldn't have been much worse.
Yeah, well,
No.
That's the problem, wasn't it? If we're going to have him up front, he has to put it about, and he just wasn't getting any change out, that guy. But at the same time, he wasn't giving him anything to think about either. He was too static. He wasn't making runs. He wasn't dropping off. It was all too in there, and there was that centre half and another two beside him. So it was difficult for him, but he has to do more than that. He has to put himself about more and get himself involved in the game, because it was all played in their half, so there wasn't space, but there was plenty for him to get involved in, and he just didn't do it. Whereas Kyogo, maybe one of those flashes across the box, he gets a touch on it, but at the same time, I think Tom Rogic going off during the week was a big blow, because it's that sort of creativity, but also with Turnbull and McGregor there, that's fine, but with McGregor in the number 6, we move the ball quicker to start off the attacks, whereas with Beaton there, it's a wee bit more pedestrian, which means they get into their shape quicker. So I think, all going well, we would have had Rogic, Turnbull, McGregor in there to try and move it quicker, plus Rogic can sometimes find that pass. So taking out Rogic and Kyogo, it's a difficult one.
See, when we're talking about this, defeating this low block, I feel like, we could talk about the theory of the kind of textbook version of defeating a low block, whatever they teach in these coaching courses and all that. But I feel like this was a very specific challenge in that, we can talk about moving them from side to side. Rodgers used to do that all the time. He used to move the ball about in front of them, hoping that someone would come out, move someone out of position. You know, if you like a boxing analogy, you're kind of working the jab to see what they'll do, see where their defences are weak. But if a team is determined not to move at all, to just sit in their box, then again, it's extremely difficult to get not only around it, to get through it. If a team is so determined that they're not going to move, they're not interested in winning the game. And again,
it's not easy. It's not an easy problem to solve.
No, it's not.
It's not.
No.
And
I'm not absolving Celtic. I'm not excusing them, because ultimately they're the better team, and this is why winning a league is about finding the answers to these challenges, but at the same time, it's just, I've never seen anything like that. Melly's already said, I mean, there are sitting in, there's low blocks, and there's what that was.
And, David Martindale had the cheek to say he's seen Celtic play like that against Barcelona. And I've never seen Celtic play like that at all. Celtic are always compelled to at least try and play some football or try and win the game. So to compare that to what we've done is pretty mental. But like you said, Stephen, we should have won the game with a better team. We had the better talent on the pitch, but it is a difficult puzzle to unpick, because at the end of the day, a lot of it just comes down to physicality. There's no room. How do you beat this? And you need to beat it with creativity, and you need to beat it with decent crossing. And I feel like Jota's crossing was pretty decent in the first half, but for the other side, I thought Abada was letting us down badly again, Melly.
He was, and we've spoken about it a couple of times. Apart from the goals, he's not really offering much, is he? He's not. I thought it might be a wee bit of confidence thing. He is a 19-year-old boy coming here. He got off to a good start, and that maybe we maybe need to temper our expectations for him, because look, he's 19, he's coming in here, new country and all that. And James Forrest probably would have played a lot more had he been fit, but Abada's been thrown in there, and his form's just completely gone. He's not even getting the chances to score anymore. He was coming in at back post and doing well, but what we're wanting from wingers is not just to score, but to create chances, and he's simply not doing that. He's getting the ball out there. He's a bit tentative when he's taking on his man. He's not committing MD, and his crossing is pretty abysmal, to be honest. It's just not targeted to MD. It's just thrown in there, and it's barely getting past the first man. So a wee bit of time out of the team would probably be best for him. But again, we're lacking options with the injury to Forrest, with Mikey Johnson just coming back. It's just that squad thing again, but he's got to do so much better than that, because it's basics that he's not getting right.
And the inverted fullback thing, you're looking at that and you're going, well, does that work against such a congested area? I mean, again, in the first half, it did work, because Juranovic came inside and he took a player with him, and that gave Jota the space. It did exactly what it had to do, but I felt on the other side, I feel like Ralston knows Abada's maybe no good enough. You know what I mean? Because Ralston was putting in a lot of crosses, I felt like, in the second half. They're okay, but I feel like with Stephen, we've got an issue down that right-hand side.
Well, Ralston, I thought, was one of Celtic's better players, to be honest. I know that.
He was probably the best, but I'm talking there specifically about his crossing. It wasn't ideal.
There were a couple. In the first half, there were a couple of decent crosses, but again, you look at Giakoumakis' role in these. Did he do enough to try and get on the end of it? Arguable. It's arguable, right? If you watch back, I know it's easier said than done to just make yourself known, get on the end of crosses. Crosses have to be in some way accurate. But I thought some of Ralston's were quite good in the first half. They were getting into good areas anyway.
See, just on Ralston, there was a point in the first half where Celtic went down the right, Ralston gets the ball and curls this left foot, and it goes past the keeper. You're thinking, yes, in the back of the net. And there's a guy on the line behind the keeper, and they're even behind the keeper. Just keep it out. If that had to be in...
was that the shot? Is that the one shot?
The left-footed shot. So if that had went in, that's in the first half, it's a completely different game. Livingston's whole game plan falls apart, but we just couldn't get that. And the longer it went on, it was annoying. But I know what you mean with the Ralston going down there. He was one of the better players, but Abada was poor.
I mean, see on these games, you've made an interesting point there, Melly. I think on these games, I think your best bet, I know it's not particularly tactical or insightful, but your best bet is to try and just summon a goal or something early on and hope to throw them off, because the longer that game went on, I said to you at half time, I was like, this is going to be really, really difficult to get a goal here.
Back to the thing I was saying about Giakoumakis. It's like the ball comes in and their big centre half just bumps, heads that way. Keeper catches it. You think to yourself, you're not really causing any problems in there. You're not like the big physical presence. You're not putting elbows about. You're not, did you see him? I'm pretty sure it was one of the Aberdeen goals the other day. Scott Brown's in the box.
Lovely.
A cross comes in, or was it a corner, Melly? I think it was a cross comes in.
I think it was a corner or a free kick.
It was the cross comes into the box, right? And one of Scott Brown's own players is running past him, but Scott Brown sees the Hearts guy get the jump on him, so Scott Brown pushes his own player in front of the Hearts player, and you're like, that's the type of shithousery that you want to see for Giakoumakis. You want to see him put himself about, try to, the cross comes in, give that defender a problem, be on top of the keeper, but it just looked all so easy when we did get the cross in.
We could do a player like that. Is one available?
And I think that's where the frustration comes from, because you're looking at Melly touched on the selection as a whole, and you're looking at that midfield and you think, did we just lose that game because we didn't have Tom Rogic? Is that
Yeah.
because did we not have? Would we have won that game if we had a better number 10? Someone to create something a wee bit tricky, because it was all, we've spoken about the wings, but in the middle in that 10 position, mate, it just seemed all so predictable. I mean, those guys, Turnbull and McGregor, to me seemed to exist just to recycle the balls out to the wing.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think that's 1st of January, that has to be the priority. Get at least one midfielder or two in, because we need depth in there and we need something different as well. We can't rely on Tom Rogic. We've seen that over the years. He's a good player, but I still think we can do better in there. Looking at it now, I think the number 6 is Cal McGregor's best position, because he can start off play. So going forward, I'd like somebody in there. And I think you're right. When I was looking at the team now, Giakoumakis, Abada and Jota, the three up front. All right, Abada can get the odd goal or two, but there's not guys you think, they'll definitely score the day. Jota will come in with a few. Giakoumakis just hasn't done it yet. And then behind that, Turnbull can get goals, but McGregor's maybe not. There's just wasn't a lot of goals in the team, I felt.
Is that the manager's fault? Should they have started with his best team? Should they have started Kyogo? Did he underestimate Livingston by mixing it up a wee bit too much?
I'm not sure if it's underestimating, but we lost Tom Rogic during the week. We lost Starfelt at the weekend. These injuries are going to mount up. Kyogo's already done half a season in with Vissel Kobe, and then he's came straight here. So we have to manage these things, because we've been hampered by injuries all season. So yeah, maybe it was the more physical guy up front thinking about their big defenders, but it doesn't work out like that. Would there have been space for Kyogo in behind? Didn't really get to influence the game when he did come up alongside Giakoumakis. It was one of those games where you could pick out everything and go faults in that, but we just needed
That's
that
why we
goal.
do a podcast. It could be called nitpicking, Stephen. But if we didn't need nitpick, we wouldn't have a podcast.
Hindsight is going to play a significant part in this podcast, because I think it made sense to leave out Kyogo. Would I have done it? Probably not. I think I agree with playing your best players where possible, but as Melly says, these things need to be managed. That's why we've got a squad, and if not a home game at Livingston to play your so-called physical striker, then when are you going to find game time for him? So I thought it made sense, but where hindsight also plays into it is that if he just steps up and rattles that penalty in, this is the shortest podcast we've ever recorded.
We need to talk about this penalty. I mean, you need to talk about it now. That was well, first of all, what was that penalty?
To the letter of the law, yes, he raised his hands to Kyogo. Could have done without the silly wee kind of delayed flop at the end of it, but you need
to let the ref see it happened.
Exactly,
especially when it's Bobby Madden.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
But before we go on to the penalty, right, we will talk about the referee, but I do not want to miss this opportunity to talk about arguably the most mental decision I've seen recently. We've been talking about refs a lot. Granted,
is this the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
What's that?
Well, there was a point in the game where I think it was Omiyonga in midfield, right? He was hacking relentlessly through the game, right? Bobby Madden finally blows the whistle, right? Gives Celtic a free kick. Gets him, goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Points to all the places where he was fouling Celtic players, and you think, right, okay, what always follows is what? A booking after that.
Yeah.
No, he went right on your way.
5's high as well.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
5 is a high number. Now, it's a different sport, granted, but 5 fouls in basketball gets you ejected out of the game. No questions asked. There's no judgment on it. If you make 5 fouls, you're gone.
Never seen it. Like Bobby Madden had an absolute nightmare. No wonder. But it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm like, this guy's getting booked. And he went right on your way. I'm like, what?
No,
5 free hits.
Not that decision, but that's up there as well. That's slam dunking in at number 2. But for number 1, my worst decision of the game was the incident that triggered the lengthy injury time, which we'll circle back to for the penalty. Was that Obaye, I'm not sure of his name, the centre-half, went down under a bit of a clattering from Joe Hart, I think from a set piece or a corner. A corner is a set piece, I don't know why I said or there. So a set piece is what it was. So he stays down for ages and ages. If the crowd are getting a bit angsty about it, kind of moaning at him to get up and all that. So he gets up, takes his time getting off the pitch, and he does that thing where you need to wander all the way back round to the halfway line. You can't just enter the pitch without permission. He walks down to the halfway line, then just runs on and literally stops a Celtic attack off his own back. You can't just enter. To let that go was absolutely incredible. Mikey Johnson was in the box at the time, he just ran up behind him and knocked it for a corner.
These are all the things that are doing people's nuts in about refereeing, the time wasting. I mean, he did put 6 minutes on, right? The time wasting for Livingston was the most egregious time wasting I think I've seen.
The first half, the keeper was taking ages forever. And look, I know it's up to Celtic, but it's the wee incremental things.
See, one time the keeper, right? We're talking about this as we're getting away from the penalty, right? But here's what happened. It was a by kick to Livi, right? By kick to Livi. He gets the ball off the ball boy, places it, walks back to the goal, does the thing where he kicks his studs on the post 3 times, picks up his water bottle, takes a drink of water, puts it back down, takes 3 full drinks of water, right? Slowly walks up to the ball, looks for the valve, puts it down, walks back to the goal, kicks it. Like 4 minutes to take a by kick, and Bobby Madden's just with the watch up in the air. I'm like, this is. I've never seen anything like it. And you say this after the game, Silver greats, blah blah.
We'd be saying it as if they'd scored the penalty. We'd be saying they deserved it for all of this stuff.
Yeah, but it's up to the referee. The referee's only there to stop things like this and make sure the game ticks along anyway.
It must have absolutely killed him to give that penalty in the last bit. He's like, lads, I've done everything here.
Celebrity there, Bobby Madden.
Often our philosophy on this is you only moan about the referees when you win, but shove that up your arse. I'm ready for that.
Now, man.
Just before we finish on the referees, seeing the Hibs game as well, there was a point the ball went over to our left-hand side. It was going out of play, and the Hibs, right, I can't remember if it was Boyle or Newell or whatever, stopped the ball going out with his hand. Again, no booking. This happened against Hibs under Rodgers. Remember, the ball was going over and the guy just caught it.
Slivka?
He just caught it, and then he got booked later on, which meant he should have been sent off. It was just another... You can just grab the ball and stop it going out of play because, there's nobody there to get the ball when it goes in the stand.
So we got the penalty, right? And Giakoumakis has taken the penalty. And even when he's walking up to take it, you're thinking, right, this guy's had a terrible game. Yeah. He's had a terrible game. He didn't look confident. And that penalty was awful.
We couldn't believe it. I was standing there and Stephen I was just waiting for it to happen and no quite processing how we'd got the penalty. And Steve's like, Juranovic hasn't taken it. I was like, what? He's like, he's back at the left back position. I was like, what's going on here? But there was no argument. It was just Giakoumakis picked up the ball and I don't think you can change that. Juranovic, both penalties, emphatic, buried right in the corner where no keeper can get them. Then you see Giakoumakis step up, and it was pitiful. The keeper gathered it. It wasn't even come out for a rebound or
it was like a Samaras penalty.
Don't start on that. Still caught. We do our 10-0 if it wasn't for that guy.
It's these Greeks. It's these Greeks, man.
Of course it is. The Greeks can't hit a penalty. It's an absolute tragedy. But the problem I've got right with this is the manager came out and said after the game, that was decided before the game. And what you doing?
Why?
You had Juranovic score a penalty, then you gave it to Callum McGregor, or Callum McGregor took one and missed it, and then after the game you went, no, Juranovic will be back on penalties when he comes in.
Juranovic didn't play in the game, which is
but he said when he comes back he's on the pens. I think it was 2 he scored. Juranovic scored 2, and then we give it to Giakoumakis. And even in the game, the manager would be like, "You're a fucking shocker. You're not getting anywhere near this, and we're struggling to score here. So I really want to make sure I've got Furuhashi on the bench. I've got Furuhashi and Juranovic both on the pitch. I'm sorry to do this to you, Giakoumakis, but let somebody that's going to score take it."
See, if Juranovic had missed it, you're like, right, fair enough. He misses a penalty. But see, when the guy scored 2 in a row and then you change it, then you don't have any leeway there because that is on you. Then the guy's buried him. It was only the week before he'd scored the penalty as well.
And see, if you're taking that penalty, Stephen, as a penalty taker, we are recording in Glasgow City Centre, by the way, so occasionally people walk by where we are recording and you'll hear it in the background, right? We're all looking at each other nervously about how to confront this situation, so here's how we're confronting it, we're just telling you.
If anyone's passing, we're right in the middle of Sucky Street now. We're on a bench.
So if you're the taker and you've had a horror show and you need that ball to go in, Stephen, is that where you're putting your penalty? Is that how you take one of these soft, as you coined ones, a sock full of diarrhea?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. I would tend to use my foot rather than a sock full of diarrhea to connect with that ball. This is the crux of it as well. Yes, the nothing each draw isn't the end of the world. Missing a penalty under normal circumstances isn't the end of the world. But 1, having a nothing each draw. 2, getting a penalty in injury time. And 3, slapping it meekly towards the goalkeeper is just... And even... I've listened to all the stuff about how he had a good record with penalties in the Netherlands, fine, but I totally agree with all this. Just don't change it. I feel like when you do that, when you take a guy who has scored his last 2 penalties and revert to the guy who you had agreed previously as the penalty taker, right, fine, I can get on board with that, but things have changed. We've got a penalty taker there. Don't go back on it just because somebody agreed that a couple of weeks ago, because I feel like when you do that, our reaction to that whole thing is on the At The Match podcast. I don't know if you've heard it back, but check it out at patreon.com/20minute-tims. I was mic'd up and I recorded everything from the awarding of the penalty to it being taken.
We shan't it?
Yeah, and the two of us were just like, I don't like this. It's almost like you're angering the gods up on Mount Daphabet. You're making them angry, making them angry at you. Don't mess with penalties. Like, don't. It wasn't as egregious as that. It wasn't as bad an incident, but I feel like it was the one step down from when you get 2 players arguing over it and they fall out and inevitably always miss it.
If it was going to be, like you said, going back to the agreed penalty taker, see if it was a guy that had buried them before or had get goals last year, like going back to Odson Edward or something, but a guy that's just got his first goal last week, that's no really had a record, no really started games, I just can't agree on it. And it was just one of those ones that was a mental decision. Now looking back, it was so costly and could be so costly, and it's not just the effect it has on Celtic, it's the effect it has on Giakoumakis now. He's labelled a dud by people.
Well,
it's a poor performance and that.
But the thing is, see, even when Furuhashi came on, he seemed to get less involved in the game.
Yeah.
You know, when you think, right, the 2 up front, maybe we can make something work here. Furuhashi comes on with half an hour odds to go. And I think, God, it's unbelievable. Celtic need to find a way to win games like this, because a lot of teams are going to come to Celtic Park and do that. We need to find a way to win. And like you said, there's not going to be many teams that play the way.
I don't think I'll ever see a game like that.
That Livingston play, but the manager needs to do better. He needs to do better with his team selections. He needs to do better, like when it comes to things like penalties. I don't know what circumstances how that happened. Like before the game, why you would even think of changing it, but it can't happen again. It has to be Juranovic on penalties, at least until he misses one. You can't keep scoring penalties and just take them off them, because...
And that's it. There's a danger of just assuming, right? Because, see, if Juranovic had stepped up and missed, which he might have done, we've only seen him take 2 penalties and smash them both home, but he might miss the next one. If he'd walked up and missed, we'd have been like, well, that's disappointing.
Yeah.
But it's because of the change. It's because of the change and the execution of it. We're obviously furious. But see, before we kind of wrap up on the Livingston game, obviously we're talking a lot about their performance in it, and it does sound like sour grapes, and I fully hold my hands up to it. We've definitely taken the absolutely raging at the performance. Exactly. It's a fans podcast, but I found some stats on it. It depends what the source is, but I found that they had completed 89 passes in the game, right? 89. And you think, well, that's a lot of passes. For context, I just picked a random game from England. Off the top of my head, I just went onto the same app, FotMob it was, right, where I found the stats. I went onto the same app and looked at a random English game and looked at a random English-based player. So I looked at Thiago Silva from Chelsea. He made 89 passes in their game at the weekend. So one centre-half completed the same number of passes as Livingston's entire team in a 90 minutes, and Thiago Silva was not even the highest of his team. He was third in his team.
I could do you one better than that. I went back all season and most of last season. According to the stats I pulled up, Livingston they had 154 passes total in the game. They completed 51% of them, right? So I'm just going to do some quick maths and say that's round about 70 odd passes, right, all in. Celtic had 16 shots, right? So you can surmise that, 16 odd by kicks, whatever, the keeper restarted play from that, right? So you take your 75 and you reduce it to 60. 60 passes outfield players for Livingston completed all game. That's the lowest I could find. I went back into last season. I've never seen a team play. I'm talking about even when Wraith Rovers came to Celtic back a couple of weeks ago, they managed to complete and do more passes than Livingston. It was football the likes we'd never seen, but Melly the manager needs to win the games. Bottom line, we've said this a couple of times before, Ange, we're in a title race. we've not managed to dislodge Rangers for the top of the league for a long, long time. It's that psychological thing we were always chasing.
Yeah, it's disappointing, and I think you said earlier as well that's less passes than St Mirren made against us, and we beat them 6-0.
Yeah.
So it just shows
I said that off mic, aye.
The thing with that is as well, Celtic got a couple of goals from set pieces against Hibs. The set piece delivery in this game was disappointing, and this is what we're talking about with Celtic trying to modernise. See if we worked on these things more. I know maybe they do and we don't get to see it, but see, taking set pieces, the deliveries from set pieces were shocking at the weekend.
Yeah.
Livingston are a big team. We need to find ways around that, but I can't remember one delivery from a set piece that put them under any pressure. That shouldn't be happening. Those 2 goals against Hibs, we got another one recently. We were getting goals from set pieces and corners. Like, see if we can add this. It really makes a difference, and all it would have taken was one good set piece and a goal from there, and that would have killed Livingston. So these wee things we're working on, where it's quick corners or better corners, set free kicks and all that, these wee incremental gains get you the results in these games sometimes, and I don't think we're doing enough of it.
I'm always dead like reluctant just to point to things and say we should be doing that better. You know, and there's this assumption that Celtic aren't doing all they can in set pieces and all that. But I take your point on that the set pieces that game were absolutely awful. And then it's one of these ones where we seem to have, I said this a couple of weeks ago, we seem to have 1 or 2 players performing well every game, but we never seem to have like a collective. Like, so in that game, Furuhashi wasn't playing, who's obviously probably our best player, and Tom Rogic was out, who had an absolute stormer against Hibs, and nobody was able to step in and give us the performance these guys were. Jota and Anthony Ralston were probably our 2 best players first half and collectively in that game overall, but nobody was able to come in and do a Furuhashi performance, a Tom Rogic type performance. And the problem you've got, Stephen, is it's the high of that Hibs game. We murdered them. We thought this is it. You know, we absolutely murdered Hibs. We thought this is it, and then you've got that.
I think just before Stephen comes in, it really goes back to the summer, doesn't it? That this huge rebuild is starting to show when Celtic drop points, that unless Celtic have their first 11 out, we can struggle. We can struggle because the drop off from Kyogo to Giakoumakis is big. The drop off from Rogic to Beaton is big, and even then, you'd want somebody like Tom Rogic being a regular for starter for Celtic at the start of the season. We'd be like, no, that won't happen.
That's like having a Ferrari that's no working, but instead you've just got to walk.
And it's Beaton's birthday on Saturday as well, and 30 years old, he's been here a long time. Just guys hanging around. I know it's like Celtic have got the better players, but it goes back to this. That sort of big change, that rebuild shouldn't be happening, because this is what happens. We bring in so many players, yet we're still short in areas that's costing us now.
It's because Ange doesn't have the players to play the way he wants. Now, he knows that. And it's obviously going to be very difficult to get him that. And it seemed like an impossible task to do that in the summer. And Andrew's obviously got a way he wants to play, and we have been unable to give him the players. And this is all part of the rebuild and yada, yada, yada. But I'm looking at that game and you're like, can we just please never play Livingston again?
Get down. Absolutely get down. Like there's that Lemmy meme of him talking, get fucking down.
Take more points off us than any other team this season.
I know. I'm absolutely sick of Livingston now. But it's, again, Jamie, you just said you don't want to point to anything, just say do it better. And I think that's absolutely right, because
there's too much of that now. Like Celtic lose and somebody goes like, we're not reacting to individual points of view, but Celtic lose and you're speaking to people about the game and you're reading comments on social media and you're reading forums and people go, oh, we just need to stop crossing the ball or whatever. And you think, well, aye, we do, but we also need to start scoring crosses. We need to, I suppose the overall point I'm making is somewhere with the players available to Ange and the players available to David Martindale at Celtic Park on a Saturday afternoon, there is something that manager can do to win that game. Yeah,
there's absolutely no doubt, because if it's as simple as that, well, having said that, it's, the old cliche goes, it's easier to destroy things than to create. So it's easier to be in Martindale's position than it is Ange Postecoglou.
I think I saw a stat, just that might help reinforce your argument here a wee bit. Like, we have had 80 crosses against Livingston in 2 games and scored 0 goals. So.
Right, there you go. But on I don't want to. There was a couple of drop points recently, and I said that I don't want to catastrophise every single drop point. And they're not at the end of the world at the end of the day. And a lot of this, almost all of it is down to having missed a penalty. That's the biggest gripe here, because we're no bothered about it.
That's the one thing the manager could have done is not change his penalty taker. If he had changed that, we're probably sitting here with 2 points behind Rangers, but he chose to change the penalty taker, so he has to carry the can for that, I think.
And where I'm going with that is that...
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and it's not always just that we've dropped points, so it means the system's broken, because I feel like there's so much talk about Ange Postecoglou's system that's the go-to. If we drop points, the system's broken. But look, ultimately these players know how to win games. If we're getting as far as the 18-yard box and no one's taking on a brave pass or taking on a shot or getting the ball out wide quick enough, James Forrest comes on, who's been out for ages, so I'm not going to apportion any blame to him, but really what you're looking for him to do is try and get to the byline.
He needs to eliminate.
But he kept drifting inside. So none of this is to do with the system. It's just these players know how to do this. It's just ultimately it didn't work out. They found it very difficult and they dropped points. And I'm not saying, there's nothing you can do about it, but I think it was a very challenging game and Celtic failed that challenge.
See, the thing I keep going back to about the penalty is, see, when you're talking about what could the manager have done if he had done this, had he done that, that's all kind of subjective, but see the penalty thing, that happened. It was a definite, and then he changed it. But when Stephen's talking there, like there's so much focus on Ange Postecoglou and his system just because it's a wee bit different. It doesn't really happen to many other teams, I feel, where it's just this system, you need certain players to do it. The system's fine. We've seen that against Hibs, one of the better teams this season, and we absolutely ripped them apart.
Best half of football we've played for.
Yeah, we've won how many games in a row. We just came up against something that we found difficult at the weekend. We had that get out of jail card, and for some reason things get switched around and it didn't work out for us. But all this system chat, like it's not a big deal to me because other teams play it. This teams play it this. Finding players for the system. Anthony Ralston's been one of the best players this season, and he's never played in that system before. Same with a lot of other players, so I think the system's fine. It was just, we didn't just nail down that one goal we needed, and we can just go back. If we hadn't got the penalty, you could say, we can go on about the system, but the fact is we had the chance to score and didn't take it.
I think the difficulty is though, like, there's so much pressure on this season, and that was an opportunity. That was a golden opportunity to go top of the league, and we've just sort of let it slip. Rangers absolutely murdering Motherwell there.
We effectively teed that up because we did the opposite of putting pressure on them. We've given them an excuse to go out there and batter Motherwell. They took that opportunity with both hands, and basically Celtic presented it to them by, the chat, the bottles crashing over the East End and all that sort of stuff. We had the opportunity and we passed it up. So that's very unfortunate.
It's going to be like that for the rest of the season, back and forth. Well, not so much back and forth, but maybe like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. We did say a couple of weeks ago, I feel like you're always like constantly having to check in with yourself with Celtic. Like, how angry am I? How pissed off am I? How serious is this? We did say a couple of weeks ago, it was a couple of months ago now, like, what represents success? Where do we want to be? And we also kind of had the conversation about January, like, we need to be within touching distance of them in January. And that's not really about accepting these losses, but it's maybe about appreciating the fact that some games aren't going to go our way. But I think the January transfer window once again has come into sharp focus, hasn't it? Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I think it's, results dictate everything in this game, especially in the podcast game, because see, we've done this in kind of reverse order because the Hibs game was actually very good to a point. The first 40 minutes until Tom Rogic went off was absolutely outstanding. No. That exactly my point. So if we'd managed, if the penalty goes in, we're sitting here raving about Tom Rogic, or raving about David Turnbull's performance in that game because he set up 2 goals, or raving about Cameron Carter-Vickers, get the deal done, Celtic and all that. But unfortunately, that game has come along and popped the balloon a wee bit. So that there's no doubt that the January transfer window is very important. But the reason I said that results kind of take the focus off everything is, see, when you're winning, you don't really care about January. You're just like, well, hopefully we can add quality. The focus switches from we can add quality to this winning team to January, major surgery needing done in January. Now, that's as fickle as that. I think it's a case of 2 or 3 players in January. We need another winger and we need a number 10, and that might do us for January.
Left back, ideally. A good left back. We've got 4 of them.
We honestly cannot have any more left backs. We could field a game of 7s with only left backs at the moment.
But we do need something different because we've seen the injuries this season, and that midfield is just badly needs some help in there and some quality as well. But when we're looking at this, it's a 0-0 draw with Livingston. It is very disappointing, but sort of looking at stepping back a bit, like you said, and looking at the sort of bigger picture, see if we go out and beat Dundee next week, and then we'll look at this between the last international break and this international break, depending on how the Ferencvaros game and Dundee game go. If we get 2 victories there, then you're looking at it saying, what, we won 6 games and drew 1. If you were looking at it at the start of that, you go, that would be decent. It means we've cut the gap on Rangers. I didn't think we'd expect Rangers to drop points in 2 home games, so they'll drop points again, but it's just disappointing. That's Dundee United and this game. Win those 2 games, we're joint top of the league.
We need to also be aware that we're not used to seeing Celtic drop as many points as this.
No.
I mean, last season, obviously, we all know about that, but this is not the norm for Celtic. This has been a pretty poor start to the season, and although we had a couple of wins there, it's sort of, you're always a wee bit nervous when you see these.
See, it's another difficult one, and it all goes back to this rebuild and this new team, because bad start to the season. I've watched some of the best football I've seen from Celtic in years at the same time. We've beat teams 6-0, 5-0 with that Hibs first half. You're like, this is unbelievable. And then to go and draw 0-0 with Livingston to get a Dundee United game, it's just...
I mean, we've only scored 1 more goal than the Rangers on the league.
They've caught up quite a bit.
Yeah,
from
they have
Motherwell,
caught up. Yeah, they've caught up.
well, they have, but at the same time, we've still got the best goal scoring and the best defence in the league, yet we're 4 points behind. So hopefully, I was reading at the weekend there that apparently in most of the top leagues in the world, for every goal you score is kind of worth a point. So Celtic are kind of behind that right now. Apparently it works out. But Celtic are kind of behind that right now. So if we can get that going, and the defence has got better recently, it's just that Hibs game's the only goal we've let in the last, 5 games? So
well, the teams in the Scottish Premier League, there's 3 teams that have scored 15 goals in the Scottish Premier League. They've all got 15 points. So, maybe Melly's onto something here. Maybe expected goals really means 1 goal equals 1 point. That's that's what it means all over the world. Next up for Celtic, Dundee away. Lee Griffiths is Dundee.
To give them their full name, Lee Griffiths is Dundee, who recently were gubbed off Malky Mackay's Ross County to give them their full name.
The expendables, like all these players dragged from everywhere joining Dundee. Just beat Dundee and then we can get on with the league and hopefully Rangers will drop some points. Next up for Celtic, Ferencvaros in the Europa League.
Never heard of them.
Never heard of them. A wee win here would be lovely.
Yeah, because a good result here, all but guarantees, not fully, but almost guarantees is some sort of European football, some sort of knockout European football, which I think would be really good. Now, it's up to yourself, up to the individual to decide whether you would want to try and finish second in the Europa League, because of course we want that, but whether it would be better to do that or go into the Europa Conference, and you know what, just try and get a couple of knockout ties one day, a couple of wee exciting. I would love that personally. I know people, of course, the Europa League is the more important, the more prestigious competition, but it's been a long time since we've had some properly exciting knockout football.
Yeah,
in
winnable
Europe.
ones even.
Exactly. So I'd really enjoy that. So a good result.
It's a tricky game.
Ferencvaros.
I mean, they've had 3 games since they played us. They've not lost. They've scored 9 goals, including one 7-0 win.
Ooh. It's going to be a tricky one. I think if we can even, as Stephen said, get a point, that kind of means we're enough ahead of them, and hopefully we can get something against Betis at home. But looking at it now, I'm looking at the game going, do you know what, just get through it unscathed. No injuries. We've lost Rogic, we've lost Starfelt. Starfelt was really coming onto a game, so was Rogic. The drop off from Starfelt to Welsh or Beaton again is pretty poor. Is Beaton going to need to play in midfield again? So it could be Beaton and Welsh both coming in. That's no great, is it?
Beaton and McCarthy in midfield, that dynamic duo.
Even then, it's McCarthy's not going to be able to play the full game. So it's another game where I'm thinking, right, let's just get through it unscathed, get to Dundee, get the result. The Griff won't be able to play, unfortunately. Nope. So I don't even think he started at the weekend. But Rangers are playing Malky Mackay's Ross County, I'm sure, at Ibrox. So I wouldn't be hoping for anything there. So we're going to need to do our own job against Dundee. And the Ferencvaros game, I don't want to write off Europe, but love a victory or a draw, but please, just no more injuries, man.
Yeah, absolutely. The Starfelt one was really disappointing, because I hate to see when players are just finally kicking into a bit of form. Yeah. Well, he's been in form for a while, in fairness to him. We've been backing him up for a long time on here, but he started to look really good. He's starting to shake off that bomb scare pattern that is very unfairly followed him around, only to get a hamstring injury. And I don't think he's got much of a history of that. So there's maybe a little bit of adaptation problems to Scottish football, to getting used to Ange Postecoglou's training and all that. But I don't think it's uncommon for players to pick up a couple of injuries like that when they're trying to get used to more intense training, coming to a club like Celtic. I remember Liverpool were like that under Klopp when he first came in. They got a lot of kind of soft tissue injuries, as they're known. So maybe it's just a case of trying to get used to that. But it's very unfortunate to lose a player like that, especially as that partnership has started working really well. Stephen Welsh hasn't started since the Huns game a while ago, so maybe take him a wee while to get up to speed. But just very disappointing. If Welsh plays, I don't want to see Beaton back there, but we're kind of low on options, to be honest.
And that's the story of the season, isn't it?
Yeah,
the recurrent theme of this season is the work needing done to flush out all the crap that's still about and bring Ange the brand new team that he really needs in order to bring success. And look, we will bring this episode of 20 Tim's podcast to a close. Stephen, no video this week, which is a shame because Melly came dressed as a cat for Halloween.
Sexy cat.
Yeah, and no one gets to see you look cute. It gives a wee meow for the cat.
Yeah. Good George Galloway.
Would you like me to be the cat? Right, so any final thoughts?
I've come dressed as a sexy nurse with a tiny little bit of blood.
Zombie nurse.
Pouring out the side of my mouth as people get away with these days. No, thanks for tuning in, folks. Thanks to the guys at the Crazy Chef's Cafe for giving us a venue to record in, because we get on with the job.
And look, Manscaped, we shaved our balls for nothing here, boys. Don't even get the video out.
That is a revolting
Smooth
image.
as an eel as well.
And on that, thanks for listening.
An eel.